So this is the one that most people are familiar with. This is the verse that is often called the Proto-Evangelium. Um, it says, "I'll put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and her offspring. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel." So this is called the Proto-Evangelium, i.e., the first gospel, because the idea is that the first time that the gospel is declared is actually here in this um, verse. So the Catechism says this about Genesis 3:15. In this is paragraph 410, by the way. After his fall, man was not abandoned by God. On the contrary, God calls him and in a mysterious way heralds the coming victory over evil and his restoration from his fall. This passage in Genesis called the Proto-Evangelium, the first gospel, the first announcement of the Messiah and Redeemer, of a battle between the serpent and the woman, and of the final victory of a descendant of hers. So, okay, I was talking about my joke on Tate and Kennedy. Um, I don't think I've ever watched Tate and Kennedy, or maybe I haven't forgotten about it. But um, yeah, perhaps I'm not missing out necessarily on anything by doing so. Now, going back to the Bible study, uh, before we get into the meaning of this text, I want to address some of the textual issues that inevitably come up whenever we talk about this from a Catholic context. So, um, most Catholics are familiar with a version of Genesis 3:15, but the version they're familiar with has female pronouns. So, for example, the Douay-Rheims version, which is a translation of the Latin Vulgate, um, has this. Um, I will put enmities between thee and the woman, and thy seed and her seed. She shall crush thy head, and thou shalt lie in wait for her heel. So notice that says her instead of him, she instead of he. Um, so what's going on? Why is there a difference in pronouns? Well, first, in order to address this, we should look at all the various versions of this. So beginning with the Hebrew text. So this is the Masoretic text. In the Hebrew, it says in the second half of the verse, Hu yeshuf charosh ve'ata teshufenu akev. So clearly you see masculine nouns here. Who is a masculine pronoun. Yeshuf is a verb that is conjugated for the third person masculine singular. And then ve'ata teshufenu akev. So again, the pronominal suffix on the verb is third person masculine singular. So a masculine individual is clearly in view here. I've heard some people try to argue that, well, it could mean either feminine or masculine. Well, in the context, it's clearly masculine. So I don't see how you could say that this is ambiguous. If you go to the Septuagint, it's actually a similar phenomenon. Here you get this, where it says, avtosu terisi kephalin kesu terisis avtus ternan. So avtos is the masculine singular pronoun, and avtu is the same thing, just in the genitive instead of the nominative. So the Septuagint agrees with the Masoretic text in reading this as Greek. Oh, thank you for the compliment in the chat. Now, where does the feminine come from? Well, it comes from the Vulgate. So now we move to the Clementine Vulgate, where it reads, um, and it says here, ipsa conteret caput tuum et tu insidiaberis calcaneo eius. So ipsa is the feminine pronoun. It's the third feminine singular pronoun in Latin. Now, in Latin, there are basically three slightly different versions of this. There's ipse, which is masculine, ipsum, which is neuter, and ipsa, which is feminine. And the reason why you get the feminine here, is because a lot of manuscripts of the Vulgate have the feminine. Interestingly, St. Jerome himself seems to have thought that the text was originally masculine. Because if you read St. Jerome's commentary on Genesis, he actually uses ipse, which is the masculine form, rather than ipsa, the feminine form. So whoever wrote ipsa in the current edition of the Vulgate that we have, it was not St. Jerome himself. He himself testifies that it was masculine. Rather, it must have been a scribe coming after St. Jerome. Even among our versions of the Vulgate or our manuscripts of the Vulgate, while most of them contain ipsa, there are a few that have ipse in them. So even some Vulgate scribes recognized that the original text had the masculine. But this version was the one that was promulgated throughout the Middle Ages and up until fairly recent times. So this is the version known as the Clementine Vulgate because Pope Clement, I don't remember which number, but was one of the post-Tridentine Clements, um, uh, basically declared that this is the official Vulgate for the Church. Um, Now, if you look at the Nova Vulgata, which is the current edition of the Vulgate, well, it's not really the same thing as the Vulgate. It's more like, think about the King James Version and the New King James Version. The New King James Version has some similarities to the Old King James, but it's a totally new translation. So the Nova Vulgata is the current Bible of the Latin Rite. It has some similarities to the older Vulgate, but for the most part, it is a completely new translation and makes completely different textual choices than the old Vulgate. And here, so the Nova Vulgata for Genesis 3:15 says, "Ipsum conteret capitum." So the translators of the Nova Vulgata decided to split the difference between the masculine and the feminine by using the neuter. So it shall bruise your head. Well, it makes you wonder, what does it mean? So, well, if it's it, then it could be either a male or a female. So, now there's a theological significance behind this. So you think about how in most Catholic piety you have the image of the Virgin Mary crushing the head of the snake. Um, there's a number of statues that depict this. Now, a lot of Protestant critics of Catholicism will make note of this textual variant, and they'll say that, look, the Catholics, they're using a faulty translation, and they've built this whole false imagery around the Virgin Mary based on it. But if you think about it, even if the masculine is the original, that doesn't mean that Mary doesn't have a role in the bruising of the snake. So think about Revelation 12, where she gives birth to the child that will defeat the dragon. Well, the woman still plays a role, even if she's not the one who directly slays the dragon. And in fact, here, you'll see how the Ignatius Catholic Study Bible allows for both readings. So in the Ignatius Catholic Study Bible, it says, the Christian tradition gives this text a messianic interpretation. Christ is the individual who tramples the devil underfoot. An ecclesiological interpretation, the church is the offspring that shares in his victory. And then a Mariological interpretation, Mary is the promised woman who bears the Redeemer. So who crushes the head of the serpent? That's the question we want to ask. The answer is Jesus, the Virgin Mary, and the Church, and all three can be derived from Scripture. So let's start with the Virgin Mary. Okay, so the most obvious place where we should go to is the Annunciation, where the angel Gabriel declares to Mary that um, she will be the mother of the Redeemer, and she says, "May it but be done to me according to your word." So she consents to God's plan, and in so doing, she plays a pivotal role in bringing about the Redeemer who will directly crush the serpent. Connected to this is Revelation 12, where it says that the woman um, gives birth to the child, and the dragon tries to snatch the child away, but fails, and the woman is flees to the wilderness. So here you see that the woman plays a very important role in the defeat of the dragon. Remember, dragon and serpent closely connected, as we already um, intuited earlier. Now, Christ is the one who directly defeats the serpent, the one who directly bruises his head. And he does that through the cross. So the cross is where the serpent tries to bite at Christ's heel by putting him to death. What the serpent does not realize is that this is God's plan all along, and that God is about to do the Uno reverse card on him, and he is the one who will get bruised instead.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you want to see the full video, go to the link in the description. And also, while you're at it, hit the subscribe button. God bless. Hey friends, do you want others to discover why the Catholic Church is the church that Jesus established? And do you want to help people make sense of all the confusion in the Catholic Church today? Help contribute to this mission by supporting Reason and Theology at patreon.com/Reason and Theology. By doing so, you'll also get access to exclusive content for patrons only. Also, if you want to deepen your faith, there are free ebooks and even courses that you can sign up for by visiting reason.podia.com.